So it may look like a bright sunny morning here in Portlaoise, but actually there's a big thick layer of frost on the front of that car, which reduced my range significantly. So I thought this morning we'd have a little conversation over a cup of coffee about charging times, charging curves, and what it's really like to have a Citroen E-C4. Now, of course, I want to preface all this with the idea that if you own an electric car, the chances are you're going to charge at home for the vast majority of the time. And your charging speed there is going to be unaffected by how fast you can charge these things. Okay, so it's always going to be 7.5 kilowatts or thereabouts starting off, and the charging curve will reduce that over time, so it's not charging at that speed for the entire length of time it's plugged in. Till eventually it's either full or you decide you're going to turn it down to 80% charge. Most of these cars you can program in to say you only want to charge to 80% or 90% or 75% or whatever you want to do, and that keeps the battery healthy for longer. But what I do want to cover today is the charging curve for one of these big bad boys, because these all vary around a little bit, and the answer really seems to be it depends. So it depends on the outside temperature, it depends on the ambient temperature, it depends on the speed of the charger itself, depends on how fast the charge can go into the car itself. So let me try and explain how the charging bit actually works, because it is pretty different from putting fuel in your car from a petrol or diesel car. So to put it in simple terms, the charging curve is how fast the car will charge over time. It's how fast you can push electricity into the battery. And if we use something like a can of Coke or a glass of Coke or a glass of fizzy drink, when you pour first, the fizz is fine, it's down towards the bottom, but as it reaches the top of the glass, the fizz outdoes the actual liquid in the glass, so you have to slow the pour to fill the glass to the top without the spill of the effervescent bit coming out over the top. It's pretty straightforward. So if you pour a can of Coke into a shot glass, it just goes all over the place. But if you pour a can of Coke into a bath, well, it just fills up. And the more Cokes you put in, the more full up it becomes, but it depends on how fast you fire that fizzy drink into the bath. If you put it in too fast, things get out of hand. If you put it in at just the right speed, you'll fill it up to the very top and it'll all be fine. Same applies to these batteries. So they have a maximum charge rate, which is what they normally quote you. A lot of cars can do 100 kilowatts, some cars can do 50, some cars can do, like Audis and all, can do 250 and more. Above that again. This one is restricted, I think, to 30, or seems to be, never charged any more than 30 of these things. It's 18.6 at the moment. So what's happened is power has gone in. I had about 35% battery when I got here. Not very much on a cold day. It's about 55 kilometers range according to the guessometer. So I've gotten 9.48 kilowatt hours of power in so far. It's now 18.7 kilowatt hours. So it's dropped down from 30, which only lasts for the first 10 or 15 minutes, maybe even less than that, and then starts to fizzle out. As it starts to fill up the battery, it slows down the charge because the battery's starting to get really full and agitated. So the battery's alive and moving. It's actually happening. Ions are moving about inside it, and it's trying to slow that down so it doesn't overheat the whole battery. And that's the charging curve. And every car has a different curve, but they all kind of wind up the same. They start here and they slowly go down towards the end. They start at a certain level and go on. And it depends on the temperature of the battery when you get there. It depends on the temperature of the ambient air outside. It depends on the temperature of that high-powered charger. It depends on a lot of stuff. This handle was frozen solid when I got here this morning, absolutely icy. It's cleaned off now because it's warming up from the sun, but it's actually cold to the touch. But it's still putting in power for me. So the charging curve is probably something you should concern yourself with, and there's a lot of numbers attached to electric cars, and that's, I think, what the big deal is, the amount of numbers that are attached to it. People always think that I'm very critical of electric cars, but I'm not. I'm more critical of the lack of good, solid information out there, plus the lack of available chargers and available cars. There's not that many cars to choose from still. This, however, is actually a really good car, the Citroen E-C4. Normally it's a C4. You can buy this as a petrol version. I think you can buy it as a hybrid version as well, but this electric one is really good. It's only got a 50 kilowatt hour battery, so it's not really, really long range, about 300 kilometers. And on a cold morning like this morning, you can scrub a lot of that off if you don't plug it in. But other than that, it's actually a really good, honest to good to drive car. I really like it. Then what we'll do, we let this fill up a little bit more, and then we start talking about when we get back towards Dublin. But right now, let's just go through a few other details. As I mentioned, there seemed to be something happening with this model because its fastest charge rate, even when almost empty, sticks at 30 kilowatts, as you can see in the video. That aside, the Citroen E-C4 Flare with a 50 kilowatt hour battery and a 100 kilowatt motor, giving it 136 horsepower and a claimed range of 350 kilometers WLTP combined cycle, and I seem to be getting that range pretty accurately. The price for this model is €36,603, and that's inclusive of a €5,000 SEAI grant. We don't know when that's going to go away, so if you're watching this video in a couple of years' time, add €5,000 to that price. So the reason I talk about all this is because sooner or later you're going to use one of these, and you may just end up in a little bit of a surprise because dealerships often don't tell you any of this. They often just sell you a car and let you loose. I'm up at 79%, 80%. It's enough to get me back to Dublin, so I'm probably going to stop charging now. But it's charging at 20 kilowatt at the moment. That seems to be the max. Dealers don't really tell you about this part, and this is the part that really will trip you up. If you charge at home, you won't have any of this issue. You just plug it in at home. And to throw some stats at you, electric car or any cars at home will be sitting still for about 18 hours a day, maybe 15 to 18 hours a day, and some cases even longer than that. And when you think about your commute, you get up in the morning, you get in your car, you drive to work, it might be an hour, you park the car, you go and have your lunch, you might drive it again, and then you drive home. So that's 2 hours of driving a day, plus a little bit of moving around looking for shopping centres or maybe picking the kids up from school. So 3 hours a day out of 24 hours means sitting there for at least 20 hours a day doing absolutely nothing. You can plug it straight in the wall and it'll always be ready to go, always be charging. That's if you're lucky enough to have a driveway, obviously, and if, like me, you don't share the driveway with your wife, who hasn't got an electric car, then of course you run into a few problems when you want to charge. But that's where you're going to use this part, this charging network, and the charging curve will come into play at that point. Charging curve, this one's pretty good. It started at 30. It's down to 18.7 kilowatts. Right now it's going into it and it's fine. It's enough to get me where I want to go. So I'm going to disconnect from this charger and start up the road. Then we'll probably review that car while we're at it. Okay, so it's time to look at the actual car itself. So like I said, it's got a 50 kilowatt hour battery in it, but it was an ordinary car before it had an electric bit put into it. So it's actually a good car to drive. I would equate it to being similar to driving a duvet. It's very gentle. It's very soft. You can feel how soft it is but yet it actually handles pretty well. A good acceleration in it, nothing remarkable. I think it's about 9 seconds to 100 kilometers an hour, so it's not huge acceleration. But if you are driving the kids to school, shopping, doing the normal gadding about the town, 300 kilometers range, probably more than enough for you. It's 256 right now, and I think I have 80% battery. So it's plenty, like there's enough charging to do pretty much whatever you're looking to do in the first place. And that's pretty good. Heads up display is nice. This has active cruise control as well. The only real fly in the ointment is the software behind the touch screen. The infotainment system, as is more commonly known. The software behind that's a little bit slow, so a little bit dull when you're trying to go from screen to screen. So if I click the home button there, you can see it takes a little bit. Applications, connected apps, it just takes a little bit for stuff to appear on the screen in front of you. Once it's there, it's okay, but you do have physical knobs down here as well, which make it much easier to control the temperature of things without having to open up yet another screen on the sat nav. This also has active cruise control, so I can go into assist, press up like that, and I can sit there at 106 kilometers an hour while the ice from the bonnet pops up the windscreen. Worth mentioning, electric cars don't get hot like an engine would under the bonnet that would clear off that heat down there. It melts and that's it. It just melts over time. It's not going to get warm from the engine. Quite honestly, this is a lovely car. I mean, it's just a nice car to be in, to drive, to have, to drive about in. I just can't find much wrong with the car. As an electric car, 50 kilowatt battery, it fills up fairly fast. And at home, you'll charge as normal at the 7.4 kilowatt hour chargers, which is your home charger. Like this is driving itself. I know it says hold the steering wheel, but I am holding the steering wheel, but it's charging on its own, or just driving on its own here, which is quite nice. If you want to go far in an electric car, go slower. That's really the big takeaway from any of this electric stuff, is just go slower. That's pretty much it. If you go at 120 kilometers an hour, you're probably not going to go as far as you would at 105 or 100 kilometers an hour. Wind resistance, the air quality today is very good, so we have absolutely perfectly blue sky out there and very little wind. So I'm not getting any headwind results, which is quite nice when you want to drive. Still overtake a few trucks though. So this has a funny readout as well. It tells you how many kilometers per kilowatt hour you're getting. So it says 3.1 kilometers per kilowatt hour. I don't know if that's good or bad, just saying. But you can change it to read out what you've done all along. So let me see where I was. Is that since start? I think that's since start. Oh, there we go. So since I got the car, I've done 218 kilometers at an average of 3.9 kilometers per kilowatt hour. It's probably good. At an average speed of 22 kilometers per hour. I mostly drove the kids to school. I didn't have any long range driving to do. We went to Dublin on Saturday, but I went in the train. So I didn't really have any long range driving to be getting on with. So there's no reason to use that. The heating controls are all lit out here. Heated seats in the front of this car as well, standard. There is a wireless charging tray here, which is actually pretty good. It does put out a good speed as well, which is very unusual for the wireless charging. Wireless charging, by the way, is quite inefficient. It builds up a lot of heat and there's a lot of lack of charging power in it. Actually, you're better off using a cable if you want to charge up quickly. There is drive modes. I've remained in normal most of the time. Eco turns off the air conditioning. And reduces the kind of top speed stuff and all that to make it go as far as you can. Then there's a sport mode, which just makes the car give all its torque. That's pretty much it. Then you use all the batteries. Now, it's a very cold day, so I'm getting less miles today than I would normally. 226 kilometers left now. I think I said 256 when I started. I've only come about 3 or 4 kilometers, maybe 5 kilometers. But this is one of my favorite electric cars because it's simple, because it's easy, because it just directly replaces a petrol version. So just take a direct petrol car, put electrics in it, and off you go, and you're done. That's what this does very well. Plus it has an iPad holder, which, if I show you, the iPad case that comes with it is one size. So if you bought a mini iPad or a different iPad or a 13.5-inch iPad or whatever the big one is, it's not going to fit in this. But still, I suppose, if you want to spec up an iPad, and you can attach it to the dashboard there for the passenger to look at, and you can do them in the back seat as well if you want. So there's like a few little options in it as well. But I think just as a straight up, honest car, just as a nice place to be, a very quiet thing, like driving a duvet wrapped in a cloud, this is the car that I think you should probably buy if you don't want any problems or any efforts. You don't want to stand out in the crowd as driving a big electric car, and it's reasonably priced, 36 grand comparatively to the rest of electric cars. It is a lot more expensive than its petrol version, but as electric cars go, this is fairly affordable, and there's a good amount of options on as well, including the active cruise control, decent boot, lovely back seat, you fit all the kids and passengers into it. It's just an honest car. Now, to round it all up so people don't get too upset, as I've said multiple times before, if you charge at home, you will save a fortune. If you charge on the street, you will start spending money. If you charge regularly at a fast charge point, you will probably end up spending as much as you would on diesel. And if you charge as regularly on Ionity or any of those other ones that, and you're not a Volkswagen owner car, you will definitely spend more than you will on diesel. But the vast majority of you will charge at home. Get a home charging unit, put it in, and then you've got all of the benefits of an electric car without any of the drawbacks of using the infrastructure. The Gardaí have somebody pulled over up here. I'm going to pull out the other lane and give the Gardaí a bit of room there, because this often happens. People encroach in space. That looks busy. Anyway, I know the sun is on the lens there, but thank you very much for joining and coming along on today's little drive. I hope you learned a little bit about the charging curve as we talked about earlier on. If you've got any questions, put them down in the comments. I'm sure there'll be a load of EV enthusiasts come in and go, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to electric cars. But you know what? It doesn't really matter, because in essence, I'm learning, you're learning, everyone's learning. Electric car ownership is becoming a little easier as we get along, and we're starting to get a good few nice new cars in it. This is one of them. I have nothing against the fact that this car has a petrol alternative. I think it's pretty good to be able to choose between the two. They're still too expensive, but for the rest of the part, they're actually not that bad. Delighted to have you along. Thank you very much for subscribing. We're on our way to 80,000, hopefully 80,000 subscribers now, and we start kicking on to get to that 100,000 mark. Will you be one of them? I don't know. I'd love to hear your comments in the comment box below as to what you want to do. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, I'll see you on the far side.